Morning. Galatians chapter 5, where we'll spend the next month and a half, 2 months or so. Before we get started, Brother Doug, we open this in prayer. Galatians chapter 5, we're going to try to look at verses 1 through 6. We'll say this, clarity of mind, Brother Doug, that was perfect. I truly think that I could say this phrase fits. I agonize over every Sunday school lesson, whether that's, I don't know why, whether that's because of me or I try to accomplish too much, but agonizing over it definitely is a good word. But I can tell you this week, I really struggled. In fact, I wrote this lesson up 3 different times, 3 different ways, and then tried to blend them all together once, and then did the whole thing again this morning. So clarity of mind, very good. I will probably spend a little bit more time looking down. This is normally to try to at least keep in this frame because I've looked at it from so many different angles. We'll try that. But last week, Paul closed out his defense of the doctrine of justification by faith in the end of chapter 4. And that's Paul's style. He always deals with the doctrine first. Let me give you the foundation. After the foundation, then he moves on to, because of this foundation, now do these things. And that's what happens right here. Beginning of chapter 5 starts with, now, because of what we went over, stand fast. I've established what I'm going to call you to stand fast in, but stand fast. That's doing something. That's defending. That's protecting. And so he kind of closed out this idea of doctrine in chapter 4. Now, he did this with a very scathing illustration or comparison between Ishmael and Isaac. Remember, Ishmael was illegitimate. Ishmael was the product of Abraham's lack of faith. It shows the picture of what man can do when we try to jump in there and make it happen. And Isaac is the exact opposite. He's not illegitimate. In fact, he's the rightful heir. He's the miracle. He's the product of God's blessing. He is the product of faith. He is the promise that was given. And so he made this picture, and then there are 3 kind of conclusions given from it. One, very scary. He's writing to the church, and to the church he says, some of you are Ishmaels. Or that should be terrifying. Some of you are product of the flesh. You're illegitimate, you're religious, but you are not born into the family. Some of you are in that group. Now, I don't believe Paul thought that was very many. In fact, the reason why is verse 9, which we're not going to get to this morning, so I'll go ahead. Galatians 5, verse 9. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. He's talking about a little bit. There's a few of you who are this way, but your effect is on everything. I'm going to point this out too. If you've been in church any length of time, you've heard that verse thousands of times. Very few times has it probably been applied to what it's talking about right there. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Rob, the leaven it's talking about is legalism. We never apply it there. In fact, we usually take that verse to justify more legalism. Remember how when we're in chapter 1, we talk about false teachers, they just twist it? And that's what we just twist that to fit into our dynamic of what we want it to be. So he says, some of you are Ishmaels. Probably not many, but some. And those some, they have a great effect. He says also, some of you, you're just struggling to believe. Let me tell you, you know the way you come to salvation by faith? It's by believing. But just the way you came, you have to live. And it is not easy. What do you mean? Faith is, no, it is not easy. Doug, it's not easy to believe that I'm an heir. I said, well, why not? Well, someday you're going to go to heaven. You don't believe you're going to go to heaven? Yes. But I'm not an heir. I'm not joint heirs with Christ someday. I'm joint heir with him right now. Looking at this earth and my own struggle and dealing with the flesh, that is hard to believe and to live in. And when we struggle to believe, then we're struggling to live out. We're allowing an Ishmael mentality to creep in instead of an Isaac mentality. Instead of being a product of faith, instead of being a product of God's blessing, it's about what we can do and what I must strive and what I can accomplish. And so he says, some of you, you're Ishmaels, and some of you, you're just struggling to believe. I'll give you a tip on that, by the way. What you focus on, Hank, you heard everything I just said, right? Just say yes, it makes me feel better. Hank's paying attention. I don't know if that's true or not, but good answer. So when I look at the world and when I look at me and when I look at my struggling, we struggle with Ishmael mentality when we look at something other than him. Because you know what happens when I look at him? I don't have a problem picturing his greatness or his love or his mercy or his grace. You see, focusing on him makes it a whole lot easier to live like who I am. But when my vision just gets lowered just a little bit, Miss Kathy, it gets really hard to believe. And when it's really hard to believe, what we tend to do is strive and do what we can do. In fact, we run around and say, give me what I need to do so that I can. And hence, legalism creeps in. The third thing that comes up in this comparison jumps into right here. And I want to go through this quickly because it's going to slow us down, but we need to do it well enough at least to make the point. And so that's going to take what it takes. And that's this. Remember the end of chapter 4? You know what Ishmael does to Isaac? He attacks him. He tears him down. Right, Brother Hamilton? That's what he does. He belittles him, he attacks him, he pushes him down. Well, you know what happens inside the church? You know what that Ishmael does? He attacks and he belittles and he pushes down. Now, even inside the church, what it is it's a little Ishmael, a little leaveneth the whole thing. It messes up the whole group. And what happens is a little has come in. And he says to the Galatians, you've given in. You've let the legalism run rampant. You've let it win. Isn't that terrible, Brother Moore? Careful, because it's really easy to do. Here, I want you to see how this happens. And 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9. And I thought I'd just have Eric put these on the screen, but I didn't because I want us to look at them. 1 Corinthians 8, verse 9, often gone to. Again, if you've given any counsel to any teen at any time, you've probably gone to this passage sometime to do it. 8, verse 9, but take heed lest by any means the liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them who are weak. Couple key words there. Most important word. Ms. Brockett, you know what the most important word there is? It is to those who are weak. Don't let the choices of your freedom create a problem where the weak are going to stumble, where they're going to fall, where they're going to get confused. You who are strong, okay, don't be afraid to limit your freedom to protect the weak. That makes sense? It says the same thing in Romans chapter 14. I want to go there. Most of the time we go to Corinthians, not Romans. There's a reason why, because Romans gets conflicting a little bit with one of the illustrations it gives us. Romans chapter 14, verse 13. Let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. The book of Galatians so far, Brother Hank, has been about defending justification by faith. Yes? If there's a sister book to Galatians, defending justification by faith, it's the book of Romans. He's dealing with the same thing here. And what's going on, don't judge your brothers. What's going on, Doug, is they're sitting around saying, look, if you're a real Christian, you should. Okay, and they're building the list of how you should live. So Paul's response to them, by the way, after you go through Romans chapter 3 and Romans chapter 6 and Romans chapter 8, which all deal with justification by faith, he deals with the doctrine first. Now he gets to this point, and in this point, he says, all right, quit running around building the list for him, and just don't do anything that's going to cause him to stumble. Then he goes on to verse 21 and 22, where he adds to it and he gives us an illustration. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth or is offended, or is made weak. Hast thou faith? Have it to thyself before God. Happy is he that condemneth not himself in the things which he allows. Okay, now this is what I want to do. Let me say this first. If you haven't heard me very often, Brother Hamilton, if you haven't heard me, I have many times taught lessons on why I do not believe a Christian should drink. To my knowledge, and my wife asks often, there are two things she asks all the time. They come home like, you don't have a tattoo, do you? And second, you haven't been drinking, have you? It's just, and they say no, so they get to come in the house. So I don't drink. My wife doesn't drink. My children, to my knowledge, don't drink. Okay. Doug, I have a pretty firm standing on not drinking. I know the Bible says wine is a mocker and strong drink defiles, and you're not wise if you play around in those areas. I know it says if you want woe, if you want sorrow, if you want contention, if you want your life to be full of babbling, then go ahead and play with that stuff that makes your eyes red. I know it says in Leviticus, don't drink before you go to the temple or there'll be a curse. I know it says that a king should not be given to wine and a prince should not be given to strong drink. If you're going to lead, you need to stay away from those things. I understand that. And I firmly want to just, so therefore, give the conclusion. But I also understand that we're talking about a time period where there was no refrigeration. The chance of drinking anything that had sugar in it and it not having some fermentation was almost negligible. And even if you drank strong drink then, it doesn't come close to what we produce today because we distill it. We make it stronger. And I understand that 2 Timothy, or is it 2 Timothy talks about the preacher is not to drink at all, but deacons are not to drink much wine. And I understand that it says that if you're sick, give a little. And I understand to them who are dying and in pain that there's wines to be given. So, Doug, this becomes some big convoluted, you can make an argument. But guess what you can't make an argument to? You can't make an argument to this idea that let the strong protect the weak and not do it so they don't stumble. If you ask me, not in a Sunday school class, do I drink? This would be easy. No. Why? Because I believe there's a calling not to cause others to stumble. I think if I drank, my children would. I think if my wife did, my children would. I think if I made a defense for, they would. And it's just not that important. The risk doesn't come close. There are some things not worth fighting for, and others are. And so I would stay on that argument. By the way, Paul did. That's the argument Paul stayed on. If you read Romans, that's why we went to that passage. However, here's how. Now remember what we're talking about. Doug, remember what we're talking about. We're talking about how Ishmael mentality, how it comes in and how it takes over. So you have this, it really is a thesis statement. When making decisions in the gray area of your life, ye who which are strong should make that decision on, I don't want to do anything that can cause the weak to stumble. That really becomes the preeminent, boom, marker. So this is how that affects, a little leaven affects the whole group. What happens is, here, let me do this. You're not supposed to use illustrations that actually happened in your life, so usually I make them up, but I'm going to break that rule. Okay, and I'll say, this is the person that this we're talking about is not here. Okay. But Doug, I one time had somebody very upset over music. Over the music that we play in here, over the music that was played upstairs. Miss Kathy, let me tell you, I'm old. I'm really old. If you want to talk about the music I like, okay, I tease the girls because they don't sing the songs I want them to, because I say, what do you want me to sing? Sing my tribute. Sing Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Okay, those are songs that I love. Okay, now, I'm not so old and shoved into a corner that I can't see the beauty in a song that's written, like in this century. But if you want to talk about what I actually prefer, it's the songs I grew up with, which were like 1970, or the ones from the 60s that were being sung in the 70s. So, but I'm not going to make people fit into my little box, and I can enjoy what they like. However, so that being said, I wasn't standing on a soapbox campaigning for what I want. I'm beating the drum of why we and what we say is law. So his conversation was this. First, I don't like those new songs. They're full of just repetition. Okay, I get that. That's a preference thing, however. What do you think happened when the Israelites were going up the mountain singing a psalm of ascent over and over and over again? Do you understand? That's what they did. The psalm of ascent was repeated again and again and again as they took each step up the mountain. That's kind of a tough argument. Okay, well, we can get into, I don't like the beats. I don't like the. Okay. Stephen, that's where it always goes, right? It goes, I don't like the beats. Okay, well, understand, go back in the history of the church, and what we're trying to clone is Bach and Brahms and Strauss, right? But you understand, when they were writing their music, the church was saying, that's the world, we don't want ours to be like theirs. Now we use that as the motto and say everything needs to fit into that frame. You understand that the piano, which we play right here, split churches when they brought it in? So it gets into this point. Again, I don't really care. If what we played is the piano in here, I'd be really happy. What I do care is when we start saying this is godly and this is wrong. Because we're called to freedom. And a little legalism destroys the whole thing. You see, it takes the eyes off of God and what He's done and His love and His commitment. So, it boiled down to this. Here's where it goes. He had me, Dr. Bora. He was going to go to Romans 14. He was going to go to Corinthians. Doug, he was going to say, well, let me tell you, I really have a problem with the guitar. You ready? Because the greatest Christian I've ever known, the strongest man in the faith I have ever sat underneath, once played country music in a bar, and he played guitar. So every time he sees a guitar, it takes him back to that place. And as a result, guitars shouldn't be in the church because we need to protect and not be a stumbling block. Okay, well, catch the twist. We read that verse in two places. That verse said, the strong should protect the weak. Yes? Well, let me quote this to you. That's the strongest Christian you've ever seen. That's the greatest man in the faith you know. Well, tell him to grow up. Because he is the one who needs to give and protect the weak. Not taking on the weak, putting all the pressure on the weak. That's the parent requiring the child to be better than them. Good luck with that. That's leaders requiring the followers to be better. It's clear. Strong. Don't become a stumbling block for the weak. Not strong. Take that legalism and twist it around and put all the pressure on them to live out life like an Ishmael. Because that's what was happening to the Galatians. That's how a little bit comes in and leavens the whole group. It changes the whole picture. The fight does not become on God's goodness or God's character. Doug, Isaac walked by faith. Isaac, liberty. Isaac, promise. But if we're not careful, we switch it around. Here, I'm not going to get very far, so I'm going to throw this in too. Okay, those are the three areas. Josh, you see, that's kind of, boom, that's where we should have left off last week. So I know this is a tough passage. This is a tough passage. People don't want to deal with it. We want to stay in our comfort area, which is everybody be like me. Being challenged to walk in faith. Let me just point this out real quick, because who knows where we go. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. I want you to get this. Conclusion, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. It's a command. Stand fast. Defend, protect, just like it's precious. In fact, that passage comes straight from Corinthians, where it talks for us to stand fast, act like a man, quit you like men. Stand and protect that thing. When he talks about our liberty, our freedom, this is something that we give away way too easy. This is something that we let go. This is something that we replace for Ishmael mentality. This is something that we would much rather grab the list for rather than live in freedom. And he commands you, don't do it. Protect this like it's precious. So I started to put it all together on Monday, and I didn't like it. And so I started switching a little bit on Tuesday, and I started confusing myself. Easy to do. Wednesday I come, I sat in that chair right there. Preacher's up here, he's talking about the home. You would think, home, how do you get home? And it's going to, home. He starts talking about the home, mess me up even more. Because then he's talking about the home, and in the home he said, Hank, there are some things you can do. Be careful, because it'll influence your home. He gave these illustrations. Abraham lied, right? It influenced his home. Lot trusted the security of the world more than God's will for his life. Influenced his home. Jacob manipulated things to make it happen. David lived with hidden guilt. Elimelech chose the safety versus the struggle, knowing where God wanted him to be. Remember those? This is all I could think of. He sat right there talking. I sat right there thinking, the dangers of Ishmael mentality. So Brock, then boom, I'm right there. I know I was supposed to be paying attention, but I just started writing down. He probably thinks I was texting. I wasn't. I was on my phone. Boop, Ishmael mentality. Pushed to the end, he lied. He tried to control it himself. He tried it, going through how easy it is for the Ishmael mentality to come in, Doug, and for us not to walk by faith. For us to try to manipulate, to try to control, to try to limit consequences. How easy it is for us, good Christians, saved by faith, to not live like Isaac, but to live like Ishmael. And I wanted to just do that. And then, Thursday, I got back to the chapter, and I decided that, Brother Hank, that would be more like sermon trail down here, not so much just following the passage. So let's just go back to the passage, and let's just take a look at the passage and see where we end up, which is wherever that ends up. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. All right, so he's painting this picture of Ishmael and Isaac, and he wants us to understand. This is why it's so important. This is why It's so important that you and I sit right here and are honest with ourselves and say, it is easy for the Ishmael mentality to creep in. That's not getting in Hank, that's getting in me. That's not getting in Emily, that's getting in me. It's easy for me to see that it creeps in because he starts right here telling us that if it creeps in, we are entangled. We are back in bondage. When we are stuck in the Ishmael mentality, we are like that horse from last week, tied to the grinding wheel with no freedom, just walking around again and again and again, accomplishing nothing. Slow down, get whipped, speed up, get tired, but nowhere accomplishing anything. And Hank, a little bit of legalism destroys the whole thing. Now, he's writing about a church, but it's true about your life and my life, which is why he gives us this command. Stand fast. Protect with everything the freedom, the liberty that God has given you. If we're going to protect it, then we have to say, what is it? What is meant by this idea of liberty? It was doing well, too. What is meant by this idea of liberty? The most common questions inside a church, I bet, deal with Christian liberty. Principle. Doug, if kids come to you, you know what? It's going to be, what can I do? What can I not do? Can I talk with my hand in my pocket for the next 15 minutes? I mean, those are the questions. Where's the borders? How much is too much? How much is not enough? How far? Define for me the gray areas. Help me get a list of things that I can do. Tell me what the limits are. It is what we want. Do you see the danger with give me what I can do? Are you missing the problem with tell me what I can do so I can be good? If the best we can do is filthy rags, then what are we going to do to ever make ourselves good? Doug, you see, it changes the plane. Instead of looking and depending, we look and depend. The doctrine of Christian liberty, living out the gospel. Doctrine of Christian liberty, that sounds so oof. Okay, living out the gospel. Living a gospel life is terrifying. Salvation comes, sets people free. But then honestly, how is that 17-year-old girl going to live this way? How are we going to keep her from going back into sin? There's only like two ways. One's God's way and one's the way that makes sense to us. You ready, son? Questions you can answer. You ready? If someone breaks a law, what do we do with them? Come on, what do we do with them? They go to where? They go to jail. Do you know why we put them in jail? Because they can't control themselves and live under the law. Jail is a controlled environment. They're controlled, right? They must do what they're supposed to in jail, right? And even if they don't, you have something else you do with them? What do you do with them? They go to confinement, where they learn to conform and live amongst the law. Yes? If we're not careful, that's what we try to do to ourselves and to others. Miss Kathy, see, I know my weakness, so I want to put myself back in prison. Give me the law that I can obey, that I can be confined, because I'm so terrified of freedom. But you understand, the problem with this is He came that we might have freedom. The liberty wherewith he made us free, we're supposed to defend, and we're trying to give it away and replace it constantly. The other way is for the door to be opened, the prison to be set free, and that makes us fearful. And what do you think of our God? He's no chump. He knows the dangers of sin more than you and I, right? He knows the penalty. He's paid it, yes? He did not open the door and set us free with no plan. Before the world was, he had a plan. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4. You know what his plan was? It was to make you and I new. Before he opens the door and sets us free, we're different. We're made new creatures. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. We have a new heart. We're filled with his Spirit. He gives us a letter of love. He says we're betrothed in promise to him as the bride and the groom. And then he says, think on those things. Because I, which began a work in you, making you new, I, which am betrothed to you, I will complete it. I will finish it. Why are we so afraid? Why are we so quick to run back? Which is why, well, not me. Why do you think he says, stand fast, therefore? But if they're free, are you fearful? Brother Andy, be careful. Fear kills faith. You know we're supposed to walk in what? In faith. And when we're fearful, we do what we can do to fix the problem. Let's pass out the law. See the problem? Or do you see the problem? Have I done a poor job? Because the problem is this. When we pass out the list, is holiness defined by the list? If it is, holiness is now defined by what you and I can do. Does that sound right? Doug, when what I can do, when that list becomes my holiness, you know how important my holiness is? Guess what I fight for? I don't earnestly contend for the faith, Jude. I earnestly contend for the list wherewith you and I have built together. Thank you, we agree. When we replace Christ, or spirit living, or the law of love with law and taskmaster and list, Treva, how attractive does that look? Psh, psh, driven, psh, disciplinarian, psh. Come join me. Great fun. I thought this was going to take 5 minutes. I even have it written right here, 5 to 7 minutes. Galatians chapter 5, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free. And be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to do the whole law. Christ is become of no effect unto you. Whatsoever of you are justified by the law, ye are fallen from grace. Now we're going to come back. I got 4 minutes. So I just want you to, behold, I say unto you, that ye which be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. Here you go. Miss Pat, this is what he's... You who've let go of faith, You've let go of the promise and you say, okay, I'll take guitars out because I don't want to offend. Okay, I don't want to offend, so I'll take on circumcision. Understand what he's saying. He's saying right there, when you put your faith under the law, you've made Christ no effect in your life. You're not looking there. You're not focusing there. Your blessings aren't coming from there. Enabling power isn't there. Dependence isn't there. You put it on what you can do to make yourself. Say all you want to, I'm a child of the King. You're a child of what Doug can do, what Pat can do, what Jeremy can do. And that is the filthiest, dirtiest rags. If you want to be under the law, then you got to take on the whole law. You better be ready to do it perfectly. Christ has become of no effect unto you. Whosoever of you are justified by the law, ye are fallen from grace. Isn't that what you want to hold on to? Not what I deserve, what you freely give out of your loving, tender mercies. Be like David, the multitude of your tender mercies. I don't even want to limit them. Give me according to all of them, the great, full, vault full. For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything nor uncircumcision. The whole thing doesn't matter, but faith, which works by love. We're supposed to get there. That's where we're supposed to end. Ye did run well. Who did hinder you that you should not obey the truth? Doug, I want you to understand when I say he thinks it was just a small group, well, here's why. You did run well. You did start. You were there. Somebody came in and was a stumbling block. Verse 8, this permission cometh not of him that calleth you. He called you. This didn't come from him. This isn't what he taught you. This is what he want. And then it gives you verse 9, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, talking about a small number. I believe that's the challenge in every church, a small number. But that small number often is in control. You mean you're talking about the preacher or the deacon? No. No. But I'm going to tell you, if you're not careful, the deacons, the preacher, the teacher, the teachers in school will not hold fast to the faith, and those who are strong will give in to legalism to please the weak. You better be careful. I have confidence in you through the Lord that ye will be none otherwise minded. But he that troubleth you shall bear his judgment, whosoever he be. I have confidence that God will judge the one causing the pollution. And I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? This is the offense of the cross ceased. Then is the offense of the cross ceased. I would they were even cut off which trouble you. Verse 13, for brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Here you go. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. Here, we got to close. Three things. These are the three things I wanted to cover today. I guess we'll look at them next week. One, what is this liberty? We're going to look at it. When he calls us to liberty, to freedom, what is he talking about? Because it's not what today's politics would define it. Two, what are the two challenges? Here they are. The two challenges to liberty are going back to the law, legalism, and going back to sin, lasciviousness. So we'll look at both of those two things next week. Hank, we close in a word of prayer, please.